Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode here at the Debate Circle. In today's motion, we are discussing all matters financial inclusion, and we are graced by the favorite school, Chavakali Boys High School, here in the Western Regional Tournament. We have Chavakali Team A and Chavakali Team B. Their motion of dissection reads, microfinance institutions in Kenya are more effective than traditional banks in promoting financial inclusion. I'll read the motion of dissection again. Microfinance institutions in Kenya are more effective than traditional banks in promoting financial inclusion. All the best to both teams. Team proposition first speaker, you have 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, deceit is a beautiful piece of art, but yet, when painted with too much passion and the wrong shade of red, it turns into an unforgivable vial. So, to our painters today, we hope that you have the right shade of red by your side. So first of all, I'd like to kick off my debate by demystifying my motion. According to Business Insider magazine, published on the 3rd of September 2016, microfinance institutions are financial institutions that provide small loans and financial services to low-income individuals and groups. Examples are Faulu Micro Institution and Hustler Fund. According to the same source, traditional banks are simply organizations that provide a range of financial services to businesses, individuals, and stretch their hand further to the government. On to my first point, simplified processes. Loan approval in microfinance institutions are way faster and less bureaucratic, with 60% of clients receiving loans within a span of 48 hours compared to the 15% in traditional banks. Let's look at it from this point of view. Take traditional banks. You need sufficient documents, valid paperwork, and to be of working class. And the last time I checked, according to Central Bank of Kenya, 12% of the youth lie in this category. Where do the other 78% lie? According to Common Sense Media, the other 78% lie in the microfinance institutions, where you only need identification cards to get a loan. Diving into research. A research according to Kenya Business Daily newspaper, published on the 20th of April 2022, states that microfinance institutions' youth registrations have risen by 47%. I mean, can financial inclusion get any better? Food for thought. On to my second point, financial education. Microfinance institutions have put forward financial education strategies to help our youths and to help them on how to partake in loan accessibility and wealth management services. We know that nowadays our youth are currently extravagant and are drawn to by what they desire. But these financial education services aid our youth to use their money well. Let me not bore you with my endless words, but instead give you a shoulder to lean on, which are my statistics. According to Business Digest magazine, published on the 9th of October 2023, 67.41% of our youth have been financially educated to evade debts. What are debts? This is where a youth goes ahead and takes a loan without any financial education and ends up being unable to pay the loan. Therefore, microfinance institutions come forward and help us in this situation. I mean, a lion is strong, but an ant can lift 10 times its own weight. On to my last point, savings and investment opportunities. Microfinance institutions have stretched further into opening saving accounts for our youths. Our youths, therefore, in this ecosystem are known to be people who do not know how to manage their money well. They do not know how to use their money, but instead, they just use it just because they have it. And I know it's a problem that's affecting many people, but in this case, microfinance institutions have opened saving accounts where the youth can store their money. They can use it later in investments or even better business deals. So please, let us open our eyes. Let us open our third eyes and join me in this quest to propose this wonderful motion. I rest my case.
You know, in a world where promoting financial inclusion among the youth is paramount, it's imperative that we consider the impact of our choices. Of course, we may have differing perspectives, but our shared goal is to find common ground and work towards a solution that is centered to benefit our youth. On the lectern is Keith Juma from the Chavakali intellectuals, firmly and factually prepared to oppose the table motion. Without further ado, allow me to demystify the motion by defining the key terms, which are microfinance institutions and traditional banks. Microfinance institutions, as per Wikipedia, are institutions that use a system of providing services such as lending money and saving for people who are too poor to use banks. Examples are Faulu Microfinance Bank and the Kenya Women Microfinance Trust. While on the other hand, traditional banks are organizations that provide a wide range of financial services to individuals and businesses. Examples being the Cooperative Bank and the KCB Bank. When we take a step and look at this motion, we find our focal point as more effective, which leaves a question. Which stand are we taking as team opposition? If these microfinance institutions, as clearly stated by team proposition, are mainly aimed at promoting financial inclusion among the low-income groups, what of these other class? That is why team opposition will clearly convince you as to why both these microfinance institutions and traditional institutions are to help in promoting financial inclusion in a rather equal way. Which brings me to my first point, financial education. Financial education, in matters to pertain with offering financial education to the youth, it is clear that these microfinance institutions have offered education. But did you take a step to look at the youth that have gained education, especially mentorship and coaching in matters to deal with using funds and managing, and even in some cases, dealing with businesses, because the funds that are given to the youth are mainly aimed to help them in entrepreneurship. So the same way these microfinance institutions will aid in providing financial education among the youth, these traditional banks too will be able to provide financial education to the youth at a certain rate. On to my second point. Microfinance institutions have been termed accessible more than these traditional banks, but I take a stand and say that both these institutions at a certain rate are equal in accessibility, because if we look at these microfinance institutions, they have been able to be centered in many spots, especially the rural areas where a large percentage of the poor is. But then, when you look at the other hand, traditional banks, these traditional banks are disbursed all over the nation, especially we can find them in schools. Like in my school, Chavakali school, we have an equity agent. These equity agents are disbursed all over our nation. So the same way these microfinance institutions are effective in promoting the financial inclusion is the same way the traditional banks are effective. So this leaves a question. Take a listen. If new brooms sweep clean and old brooms sweep corners well, I beg your pardon. So what is the elephant in the room? That's obvious. So why can't we use new brooms and old brooms together to clean the house? I rest my case.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've just witnessed the greatest heist in world's history. Now, I'm not talking about bank robbery or anything of sorts, but I'm talking about them robbing us from the truth, the light to our sanity. But don't worry, that is why I'm here, guys. So allow me to grasp this opportunity and be your knight in shining armor and rescue you from what I call traces of ignorance. Peter Waga from the great Chavakali Titans, firm, composed, and fully loaded with fresh facts of very high fidelity onto proposing the motion at state. First of all, before I go on chewing my first bone of contention, allow me to justify my cause as to what the first opposer talked about. That is Keith, I believe. This guy defined microfinance institution using Wikipedia. Mind you, Wikipedia is not a credible source indeed. It is based on people's opinion. I can easily go there and say that a lion is a monkey and it can be successfully established and people will believe it. So Wikipedia is not a reliable source. Please clarify on reliable and credibility of your sources. You also talked about microfinance institutions are equal in terms of accessibility with traditional banks, but I beg to differ because let's try and think outside the box. Reach and accessibility. Comparing microfinance institutions and traditional banks is like comparing local grocery stores versus large supermarkets. Microfinance institutions are more accessible because they have access to remote communities and underserved communities where traditional banks have limited presence. This allows them to reach individuals who otherwise will be excluded from the financial sector. According to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, which is a credible source indeed, it states that microfinance institutions have a broader reach in rural areas, with over 70% of their clients coming from these regions compared to traditional banks, where it has only 40%. Now, if my math teacher taught me well, 70 minus 40 equals 30, a 30% margin, meaning there are 30% more efficient and more accessible, meaning that microfinance institutions are more effective in promoting financial inclusion among the youth. So allow me to reinforce as to what my first proposer talked about. He talked about lower barriers of entry. Microfinance institutions require minimal documentation, attracting 80% of clients who lack formal employment records, compared to only 25% of traditional banks. This is according to the same source, that is the KNBS, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. That is a 55% margin. This makes it easier for individuals without formal employment records or any credit history to access loans, maybe to require to start up their own businesses to encourage self-employment among the youth. Kenya is currently suffering a financial crisis, and more so joblessness among the youth. According to Macro Trends in 2024, it says that Kenya youth employment rate for 2024 has mounted to 12.15%. This is an increase of 0.08% from 2023. We can see demonstration being carried out all over the countries. And who are the main protagonists? Youths, and youths. Cleopatra once said that a lie repeated over and over and over again eventually becomes the truth. Why? That is what the opposers are trying to do to us. They are trying to offer us a bird in the bush, while we tend to press that bird into your hand. And ladies and gentlemen, a bird in hand is what in the bush. Checkmate.
So let's take a moment and acknowledge the complexity of the issue before us and approach it with open minds and thoughtful consideration. I tend to look at team proposition and what the first speaker actually said and the second speaker. In their whole presentation, I believe the only true statement I saw there was their names. I mean, these are my schoolmates. So, before I start watering down my points, we are looking at microfinance institutions and traditional banks. Microfinance institutions, take a look at this. Microfinance institutions are like greenhouses which nurture young seedlings, which are the youth, with tailored care and attention to help them thrive in the financial landscape. On the other hand, we have traditional banks. Traditional banks are like well-established trees in a forest. These provide shade and stability to younger entities, which are the youth. So, what we are trying to do, we are trying to leverage the strength of microfinance institutions and traditional banks. Before I start watering down my points, I beg to rebut the first speaker. The first speaker said that microfinance institutions offer literacy programs which are meant to provide youth with the knowledgeable skills in surviving, or rather thriving, in the financial landscape. Well, take a look at this. Faulu Bank. Faulu Bank is a microfinance institution, just so you know. Faulu Bank, through programs such as Faulu Chama, has been able to provide literacy and educational skills, or rather imparted educational skills to the youth, enabling them to thrive in the financial landscape. Another example, KCB. KCB is a traditional bank. KCB has helped through initiatives such as Tujiajiri, has offered vocational skills and training to the youth, helping them thrive in the financial landscape. On to my second proposer. The second proposer I mentioned about reach and accessibility. He has said that microfinance institutions often target rural and underserved communities where traditional banks have been excluded. Well, I pardon you for your ignorance. Let me educate you. So, traditional banks, we have an example of Equity. Equity is a traditional bank, by the way. Equity has a larger scale and a broader reach. It has been there.
It has been there. Microfinance are recent. Equity has been there and offers a larger scale and broader reach as compared to microfinance institution, which allows them, or rather gives them, a potential advantage to provide larger reach to the youth, helping them thrive in the financial landscape. On to my first point. Service quality. Customer service in microfinance institutions are inconsistent. Why? This is due to 1, limited resources, and 2, high demand, leading to higher dissatisfaction among the clients. Let's take a look at traditional banks on the other hand. Traditional banks on the other hand also have inconsistent results due to high fees and charges. According to statistics courtesy of Financial Inclusion Insight 2022, 30% of microfinance institution clients have dissatisfaction compared to the 27.5% of traditional banks who also have the same dissatisfaction. I mean, the difference is not that much. So it is evident that balancing the strength of microfinance institution and traditional banks will aid in promoting maximum financial inclusion among the youth. And with that, I beg to rest my case. Thank you.
Out with the old and in with the new. This is a saying that has been heavily understated in our community today. Well, lucky for both you and I, this motion has been placed on the rostrum. Before you, Milo Bryan from the great team of Chavakali Titans, farm ready and factually prepared, of course, to propose the motion that states microfinance institutions in Kenya are more effective than traditional banks in promoting financial inclusion among the youth. Now, the aspect of me having factual proposition is about to be blatantly shown as I rebut what this guy said. According to the second speaker, Gary, I presume, KCB has promoted financial literacy. Correct. But listen to this statistic. Financial literacy has been promoted by microfinance institutions more than the amount traditional banks have. Don't believe me? Let me break it down for you. According to the Standard newspaper published in 2022, 112 out of the 204 financial literacy programs organized in the same year were carried out and orchestrated by microfinance institutions. Now you tell me, which is more effective? Keith also said that low-income groups get their money from microfinance institutions, and asked what about the other groups. Well, here's your answer. And in fact, this statement has given me the basis for my first point. Traditional banks are basically ineffective in promoting financial inclusion among low-income earners. Again, with a statistic, according to the survey done by the Financial Literacy Program of the Youth Cafe, a whopping 70% of the 570 respondents randomly selected from all over the country earn less than 14,000 Kenyan shillings. 14,000 Kenyan shillings. What does this mean? Those youth earning for that ounce of financial inclusion among themselves cannot be able to get this from traditional banks. Again, don't believe me? Let me break it down for you. The Cooperative Bank of Kenya gives a minimum personal loan of 50,000 Kenyan shillings with a 9.9% interest rate. Absa Bank, 20,000 Kenyan shillings with a 10% interest rate. KCB Bank, 25,000 Kenyan shillings with an 11% interest rate. Tell me, where do this 70% go? 70% are majority. This shows that microfinance institutions are indeed more effective. The 30% is also effectivity, but less effective. Now, on to my second point, Shylocking or loan sharks. Let me wind back the hands of time a little bit and take you back to the decade that was 1996 to 2005. During this period, there was a very rampant financial crisis, which is loan sharking or Shylocking. These were characterized by cases being reported over and over in newspapers, in news, in televisions. Traditional banks at this time frame, if you can do your research well, were very well established. Most of the cooperative and commercial banks were established by then. But where were they to eliminate this use and regulate financial inclusion the right way? Nowhere. Who came to our rescue? Microfinance institutions, our superhero. This is because in 2008, the Financial Microfinance Institution Act was established in Kenya. Ever since then, negligible rates of loan sharking. I mean, have you ever had a case since then? No. Now, let's do out with the old traditional banks and in with the new microfinance institutions if we really do want to promote financial inclusion among the youth. Did I explain the idea to you correct? I think I did. Cheers.
I'd first like us to begin with a word of prayer. Oh Lord, we express our sincere gratitude for enabling us to gather in here today. May you rescue us from the depths of lies and darkness of my opponents, and may you also abundantly shower them with the gift of knowledge so that they realize that neither the microfinancial institutions nor the traditional banks are more effective than the other. On the rostrum, Zalo Moses from the Chavakali High School intellectuals factually prepared to relay a compedious counter-argument of the motion that states that the microfinancial institutions are more effective than the traditional banks in ensuring financial inclusion among the youth. Okay, so the third speaker spoke of the financial literacy that is offered by the microfinancial institutions. But according to our research done by the Business Daily newspaper, it reports that roughly 68% of the youth are educated by the traditional banks. What is the difference? 67%, 68%, a difference of 1%. So it is obvious that the traditional banks also offer financial education. The first speaker talked about with the right shade of red, we therefore point that neither is more effective than the other, because it is a matter of fact. Neither is more effective than the other, because the traditional banks offer a variety of loan with a high return rates, whereas the microfinancial institutions offer loans, but they are offered at a higher rate. So these promotes financial inclusion for both the youth that is not financially stable and the one that is financially stable. Okay, my second bone of contention lies with the mobile banking. Now we are living in a technological advanced era where mobile banking and digital payment systems they take the order of the day, and according to today's era, both the microfinancial institutions and the traditional banks take into consideration the mobile banking, and therefore they are accessible to both the youth that is living to the remote areas and to the one that is not living in the remote areas. So it is more accessible than the traditional banks. So neither is more effective than the other. And they also both offer security. Tom, Dick, and Harry will value a form of banking system that is more secure than the other. And according to today's era, both of them are secure. So we will prefer to store our financials in both the traditional banks and the microfinancial institutions, and therefore neither is more effective than the other. Lastly, do you hear that? Those are the voices of the youth praising both microfinancial institutions and the traditional banks, because it has led to financial inclusion among them, both of them. I rest the case.
Money, money, money. Everyone loves money. I mean, personally, as a youth, I am in love with money. That is the reason we're debating this motion at hand. Allow me to take you through the world of technology. Microfinance institutions leverage mobile banking and digital platforms to facilitate transactions and provide services, making financial services more accessible. Now, I don't disagree that traditional banks also employ mobile banking apps, but here's where the difference comes in. According to the Financial Inclusion Insights, that is in 2021, 75% of microfinance institutions' transactions are conducted electronically, while in traditional banks, the rate is at 50%. 75 minus 50, that is a 50% margin. This means that microfinance institutions are more effective. Yes, traditional banks are effective, but microfinance institutions are more effective. I came to realize that knowledge is knowing that a tomato is classified as a fruit, but wisdom is choosing not to use tomato in a fruit salad. Cheers.
It is I, Gary Mwita, from the Chavakali Intellectuals, again stand here to reiterate that microfinance institutions and traditional banks should be used concurrently to promote maximum financial inclusions among the youth. take a look at this. We've looked at microfinance institutions being able to reach underserved communities and rural areas. I've given you statistics. Banks such as Equity also do the same. We've also talked of providing financial literacy among the youth. Look at this. Faulu, through the Faulu Chama, promotes financial inclusion among the youth, which is financial education. And also, KCB, through the Tujiajiri initiatives, also promotes financial education through the youth. So, and remember, if you have read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, he says, tactics and strategies are like the victory before the war. And this is where microfinance institutions and traditional banks come in as the captains to the victory of this war. The war is promoting financial inclusions. So remember that with microfinance institution and traditional banks on the youth side, our ideals are definitely, our ideals are eternal. Losing is unquestionable. With a commitment unconscionable, victory therefore will be inevitable. So ladies and gentlemen, let's microfinance institution and traditional bank lead, spearhead, and walk side by side with the youth in promoting maximum financial inclusion. So at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, here's to a toast, to our real friends who promote, who agree that microfinance and traditional banks are more effective than traditional banks, and real pain to our sham friends who do not support this. Thank you, as I raise my case.
I would say that it was an interesting debate, very entertaining, and I would say there was a battle of wits here. When I moved to Muga, I like the statistics that you brought about from the Kenya Business newspaper and the financial stability, saving opportunity, and all of that. Very good. Then Peter Waga, a very passionate debater, and you died for your points, I would say, and also good research from Kenya Bureau of Statistics, and you brought up the figures and details. Mile, Brian, a good introduction, and you're able to convince us that financial literacy program offered by the banks is encouraging the people to be involved in, to be included in by the banks. Then from the other side, we have Keith Juma. Good introduction. I think there is need to do something more on stage presence, so that you convince us fully that what you are telling us is what you believe in. But I would say that you still do it very well on giving us the points on financial education and accessibility. I wish you all the best.